Welcome friends to another r/MaliciousCompliance video. If you want to do one good deed today, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Mahu. Something wrong with my expense sheet? Oh dear, let me redo it. No, I insist. My job sends me to neighboring countries for teaching regularly, so I'm used to unusual and contorted expense sheets for international travel. I'm high enough in the food chain to be allowed first-class train travel. Since I have a yearly second-class subscription to our national railway, I don't need any national ticket, and so I don't have any physical copy, which gets tricky when the time comes to submit the expense sheets. Custom is that we print out a screen capture of the online shop of the National Railway. Yeah, paperless is still a faraway utopia, and expense the corresponding sum in the sheet. So far so good. Travel expenses are covered with a pretty generous lump sum due to the contract with that particular client. My job has already billed my work and gotten the money, including the travel expense lump sum. I submitted my expense sheet in time with a copy from the international ticket, which reads OP's hometown to client facility city, return first class ticket, including first class upgrade, and international discount due to subscription. So I simply took the cost of the ticket, added it to hotel and food cost, and sent it. 2 months ago, not wanting to do some useless busy work. I was told yesterday that it was denied by our finance service because the ticket doesn't start at company office city. The messenger was very apologetic and offered to insist and resubmit on my behalf. I said, please don't, I'll resubmit it myself. Cue malicious compliance. So, on non-billable company time, I screen printed return tickets and first class upgrades from company office city to border city and attached the additional sheets to the rest of the receipts. After deduction of the already accounted for first class upgrade, OP's hometown to border city, the whole expense sheet comes out 10% higher in my favor, and our internal financial controller and the central financial service get to re-review my expense sheet. Honestly, if anybody's going to give you a hard time about an expense report you put in, are you going to feel bad about making them spend slightly more money because of it? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Failing Upwards in Life, Attendance in Class. I'm a student in university for a bachelor's degree. I don't know how other universities work, but in the one I study, some courses have a mandatory attendance, where all students must be present. It's checked by the TAs, and some courses don't have it. Of course, in these courses, the number of students dwindles over the days. It got more serious after COVID hit, and for a year and a half, we had to study remotely. Now, even though classes are back in the campus, each class gets recorded live and uploaded in our class site. For this reason, many courses have 40 to 30% of the students present in class. As a third-year student, senior in the US I think, we're very close to our degrees, and to fill some requirements for the needed amount of courses, we have a list of optional classes. These classes are not very serious, and everyone who takes them only does so because they're missing 2 points or so till graduation, and this specific course fit their calendar. One such course is a 2-point astrophysics course I took this semester. The teacher is an old man who talks very quietly, and to be honest is quite boring. His lectures are mostly just him reading out loud whatever he wrote in his PowerPoint presentation. His lectures are once a week on Monday mornings, so needless to say, after a couple of weeks, the attendance in this course dropped significantly. I believe over 80 people took this course, and after a while, less than 10 people came to class each week. The lecturer always complained about it, but he never did something until now. One day, a couple of the students informed him that a certain course has a seminar that falls on his class. So some of the students who still come to the class won't be able to attend next week. However, little did he expect that to the next lecture came 3 students. The teacher was very disheartened and canceled that lecture. Later after that, we received a message from him that in the next class he would take attendance, and those not present would get -5 points in the exam. In this class with non-mandatory attendance. I admit, I also was not in class that day. In my country, we have a flu outbreak now. I'm guessing it's happening in many places though, so I'm home coughing my heart out. However, a -5 points? Unacceptable. So I packed up my water bottle and my tissues and went to class. It was full, of course. I can't say the story was especially interesting or dramatic, but I did make sure to sit in the first row of the class to let him know that despite my illness, I was more than ready to learn. FYI, that mandate was canceled later that week. Probably not because of me though. I mean, especially nowadays, I hope they would realize how awful of an idea it was to say you have to be there. OP says it's probably not because of them, but them being up front in the front row, probably sniffling, coughing, having tissues with them, it probably was a pretty good motivator for them to be like, okay, you know what, maybe this isn't a good idea. And also, maybe they realized that forcing all these kids to come here isn't going to actually make them feel that satisfaction of having everybody show up to class. You know, if it was motivated from being sad that nobody's interested enough to show up from that 3-person day. Our next story is by Plethorian. They complied with the contract. I was almost buried, but was a little malicious myself. When the Navy commissioned the new Naval Hospital San Diego, replacing the old Balboa Navy Hospital, most of the medical equipment was replaced with brand new models. As part of the standard military purchase contract for new equipment, 2 copies of all operating and maintenance manuals for every item must be provided. Also, everything must be packed like it's, apparently, going to be airdropped into the middle of the ocean. This is fine if you're only buying a couple of pieces, but we were buying dozens, sometimes hundreds of identical models. I was in charge of unpacking, testing, and setting up the 7,000 or so new pieces of equipment. The amount of packing materials and paper we discarded was enormous. Early in the process, I asked my chief how many manuals we should keep for our maintenance library. He said, "Better keep them all." Okay, chief. Cue malicious compliance. I put 1 copy of the operation manual and 2 copies of the new maintenance manual for every model in the library. The others I put in the chief's new office space. I moved all of his new furniture to the walls and then started stacking. When 450 IV pumps showed up, we took a week to check them all in, and the stacks got bigger. 100 defibrillators, another 35 different defibrillators, 250 scales, 800 OTO/ophthalmoscopes, 800 exam tables, 75 x-ray machines. Eventually, Chief came over to see how things were going. By then, his office was nearly full. He initially puffed up to be pissed off, but realized quickly how absurd it was. We dumped a lot of manuals that day. Fortunately, the $8 million Hewlett-Packard patient monitoring contract included installation by them, or we never would have gotten done in time for the opening. You want to know the hilarious thing? I bet that while making sure they do keep 2 actual copies and got rid of all of this mountainous pile of the rest, when it comes time to get that manual, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe even longer, they're probably gonna be hard-pressed to find that manual. Somehow it's just gonna disappear. Even when you have 2 copies, it just somehow disappears. Our next story is by Adizoff. My mom getting exactly what she asked for. Side note, my mother and I have a great relationship. This is just a bit of wholesome malicious compliance to give you guys a break. For context, my mom's a bit of a Coca-holic, a person addicted to Coca-Cola, and carries a 0.5 liter bottle of it on her at all times. Yesterday, I went to pour myself a glass of Coke from the fridge, and when I sat down on the table, my mom looked at me and asked why I didn't fill her bottle too. I stated that she never asked me to fill her bottle, to which she replied that I should just know. Cue malicious compliance. Today, during dinner, I waited until she refilled her bottle, and when she sat back down, I grabbed my glass along with the bottle, refilled it all the way to the rim, and gave it back to her. She looked at me with a weird expression, and I told her, "You told me I should just know." We laughed around the dinner table. Malicious compliance achieved. You know, when OP said that their mom is a bit of a Coca-holic, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I thought that was gonna go a different direction. I mean, I was hoping Coca-Cola, but you gotta be careful when you say my mom is a Coca-holic. This next story is by Witty Conference 5512. I was not late home from a date. Many years ago, my mother had a rule about returning home from a date by 1 a.m. Often she would wait up for me to return. One night, I was at a dance that went longer than usual. It was also the end of daylight savings time, so the clocks should be set back an hour. In the days before atomic clocks, most people did this before going to bed for the night. I walked in the door, and my mother was livid. She angrily pointed at the clock and asked me what it said. I said it said 2 a.m. She then said why it said 2 a.m., intending to remind me of my curfew. I said, it says 2 a.m. because you haven't set it back to 1 a.m. yet. Since tonight's the end of daylight savings time, my unexpected response deflated her anger, and she said that's not funny. Who was saying it was funny? It was right. Was OP wearing face paint, big floppy shoes, and a round red nose? No, they were spitting straight facts. This next story is by First Mama Kitty, short, cheesy, malicious compliance. So a couple nights ago, my hubby and I decided to make a cheese souffle for dinner. He starts prepping the eggs and I start buttering and dusting with Parmesan cheese, the mini ramekins. I get about 4 ramekins in when I realize I have too much cheese. I ask hubby what he wants me to do with the leftover cheese. He says, hold on to it. Now, we all know what he wanted, but we also know what I did. Yep, 2 tablespoons of Parmesan in my cupped hand. Now hubby and I are walking around the kitchen preparing the souffle batter and chatting. I'm doing my part one-handed. I ask him for a hand once or twice. He's saying nothing. We get the batter in the ramekins and put them in the oven. Finally, he notices my hand and says, "What's in your hand?" And I say with the straightest face, "You told me to hold on to it." I laugh, he calls me a nut, and we ate souffle for the first time. That's just a cute little story and a cute memory. Oddly enough, that reminds me of moments as a kid where I'd make these little cutesy tiny jokes, and like looking back on it, it kind of makes me cringe, but it also is exactly what it is, just a cutesy little joke. And our final story of the day is by Chipperific. Company changes paid travel policy to save money. We follow it, costing them more. So for my old job, I was a forklift mechanic. I started off in our shop. Bad driving record kept me from starting in a service van. I'd been looking to buy a house, and once my boss got wind of it, he said, "Hey, you should move out west so we have a van out there." We had several large customers 2 to 3 hours from our shop that were being serviced by techs that would drive out and back each day. One of our biggest customers was an hour drive each way. So I'd spend 12 hours there, including unpaid lunch, travel to and from the customer. I'd get paid for 13 hours while being gone for 15 and a half hours. Getting 12 hours of on-site work before the move, our company would pay someone 2.5 hours each way and put an extra 140 miles on their service van to do so. Having techs spread out was efficient. They would occasionally send someone out with a parts restock and to help knock out some work while they're there, and they'd drive straight out and work the whole day, then drive back home at night. Well, some bean counter decided they were paying too much money for commute time. They changed it to 45 minutes given up in the morning and 0 pay in the afternoon. For most techs, it didn't change much, but for the handful of us that were the most remote, it'd mean we'd lose 5 to 10 hours of pay each week. It caused an outrage. But of course, the company said, "Too bad." So here's where we started complying. I had a customer that was 15 minutes away to the north. They had a lot of trucks that required monthly service for whatever dumb reason they decided to pick that interval. Most of them were backup units that only moved if they were in the way or when I serviced them. So I'd start my day there, do the 45-minute check on a truck that was in the same spot it was the last time I checked it, then drove back past my house to the customer on the clock, wasting a solid half hour of the day driving extra, and then repeat in the afternoon. We all did this, and our efficiency dropped. Now, instead of changing the rule to not suck, they started writing us up. Eventually, we all started quitting. I pursued my side hobby and turned it into a business, ended up renting a shop next to the biggest customer we had out here, and got to see 2 vans parked there almost every day from the main branch. I laughed knowing how much they were wasting sending them both out almost daily. Several of my old customers would see me around town and say, "Man, I wish you hadn't quit. We're switching companies now because the new tech sucks." Good job, bean counters. It's kind of shocking how little these bean counters in a lot of places kind of use their brains to make sure the actions they're enforcing actually make sense. A lot of times these companies would try to get like the shortest route one way without realizing they're going to be spending a lot more over the long term. Or they're willing to take these terrible sacrifices, in air quotes, for people that were hardworking or would do a lot of work that just make it not worth their time to try to do anything and work way less efficiently or quit. It's kind of like companies that start sourcing cheapo parts to try and get their costs down. Oftentimes it just leads to disgruntled customers and your performance tanks. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.